In 1894, a researcher recorded an Ojibwe tradition that had survived for generations. It spoke of strangers arriving from the east, crossing the Great Water in large vessels to extract copper, before vanishing as suddenly as they arrived. 50 years earlier, in the 1840s, American prospectors moved into Michigan's Upper Peninsula. They arrived under the impression that they were the first to exploit one of the richest mineral deposits in North America. The geology around Lake Superior is unique. Unlike most copper deposits that require complex smelting, much of the copper here exists in its pure metallic form, allowing it to be worked with relatively simple tools. As mining companies began clearing land for new shafts, they repeatedly found they were not alone. Across the region, engineers encountered thousands of ancient mine pits, some descending dozens of feet into the ground with surprising precision. Finding a pre-existing industrial site in a supposed wilderness contradicted the primary assumption of the 1840s copper boom. It proved that an organized labor force had already mapped and emptied these veins centuries before the first American prospectors arrived. The evidence of this earlier operation was everywhere. Investigators documented precision-cut drainage channels and thousands of smooth stone hammers, some weighing only a few pounds, and others so heavy they required 2 hands to swing. The site's age was undeniable. In many locations, massive, mature trees had grown directly inside abandoned mine pits, their roots wrapping around rock that had been disturbed long before the forest reached maturity. In 1863, government geologist Charles Whittley completed a federal survey of the region. After years of study, he estimated that ancient miners had extracted between 1.5 and 2 billion pounds of native copper. This creates a significant mathematical problem. While copper artifacts have been found across North America, the total amount of metal recovered by archaeologists represents only a tiny fraction of what was actually removed from the Lake Superior mines. Even conservative modern estimates still suggest that hundreds of millions of pounds are unaccounted for. The known tools and ornaments found in indigenous sites cannot explain where the rest of the missing metal went. Moving this volume of copper required a logistical network and a level of organization that does not fit the traditional understanding of prehistoric North America. Modern archaeology eventually confirmed the timeline of the operation. Radiocarbon dating of wooden mine supports placed the peak of this mining activity roughly 3,000 years ago, long before the Roman Empire or the arrival of Europeans. These miners used a technique known as fire setting. They built large fires against a rock face to heat the stone for hours, then rapidly cooled it with water. The resulting thermal shock fractured the rock, making it possible to extract the copper. Fire setting is an advanced method requiring planning and a specific understanding of geology. It represents knowledge passed down over generations, suggesting a sustained and professional mining culture. The depth of the timeline and the sophistication of the extraction prove this was more than casual scavenging. It was a massive industry that required a high degree of coordination to maintain over centuries. This is where the 1894 Ojibwe account becomes critical. Recorded from elders whose families had lived around the lake for centuries, the tradition preserves specific details about the people who worked these mines. The elders described the strangers using fire to break the rock apart. This oral record perfectly aligns with the ash deposits and heat-fractured stone that archaeologists would later document inside the ancient workings. To address the problem of transport, the account states the copper was moved toward the shoreline and loaded onto large vessels. Many of the largest prehistoric mining sites are indeed located only a short distance from the shores of Lake Superior. Moving heavy cargo across Lake Superior would have been the most practical route, but it required experienced crews and vessels capable of handling one of the most dangerous bodies of water in the world. The Ojibwe account provides the context needed to reconcile the physical evidence with the logistical requirements of the mine. It connects the extraction techniques and the transportation methods into a single, functional operation. Some researchers have looked for the missing copper in the European Bronze Age, where the demand for metal was enormous. They argue that local European mines may not have been sufficient to meet the scale of production seen in ancient tools and weapons. Modern scientists use isotopic analysis to compare the chemical signatures of copper deposits with finished artifacts. While some studies suggest a link between Lake Superior and artifacts found abroad, other researchers argue the evidence remains inconclusive. Regardless of the debate over its final destination, the fact remains that a remarkable amount of copper was extracted from these shores, and much of it remains unaccounted for today. Because science has yet to track the metal to its final destination, the local Ojibwe memory remains one of our most direct pieces of evidence for how this industry actually functioned. The Ojibwe account concludes with a quiet departure. According to the elders, the strangers eventually finished their work, loaded their vessels, and sailed back in the direction from which they came. While the miners left, the landscape still bears the marks of their work. For thousands of years, the forest has blanketed the evidence of an industry that removed hundreds of millions of pounds of copper from the earth. The Ojibwe tradition served as a record that existed alongside the physical archaeology. In this instance, the spoken memory correctly identified the scale and methods of an ancient industry long before the first modern geologist surveyed the land. History is assembled from many sources, some found in the dirt, and some preserved through the power of the spoken word. Who do you believe the Ojibwe were remembering when they spoke of the strangers who came for the copper?